Hey everyone, welcome to Missio Church Online. I'm really grateful that you're joining us in this way for our time together this morning. At Missio, our mission is to love God, love people, and awaken a movement. And we're excited, that the sun is out, spring is in the air, and there's a whole new host of things that we're excited about getting started on the horizon in our city. This morning, our time is going to be very simply a time of teaching, talking about a spiritual discipline that is super important in our world that we often miss, that being the discipline of simplicity. So thank you for being with us this morning in this way. I'm really grateful for that. Before we start our time, though, together, looking at this spiritual discipline of simplicity, I would love for you all to just take a couple of minutes and write in the chat area how you have been enjoying this unbelievable weather that we have been having this last week. And I mean, seriously, let us know about the things that you've been doing, the walks in the park that you've been taking, your gardening, working out, kayaking, opening windows, whatever it is. Comment in that chat section right now how you guys have been enjoying the weather this week. We really need to hear the good from your week. That's one of the things that's important about being a church. But we also need to acknowledge that some of you right now could very well have experienced some maybe pretty awful moments this last week. Some really heart-wrenching and painful things. I realize that in our nation right now, we are at a loss for words with how to wrestle and respond to more mass shootings, senseless violence, racism that is still all too present. And I don't know about you, but I have found myself this week simultaneously feeling a sense of comfort and joy from the nice weather, while at the same time a sense of deep frustration and loss at the injustice and the suffering in our world. And I think these tensions are things that we as humans, and especially as people of faith, we really have to wrestle with these. We have to hold in balance the reality that in one hand, things are just not right in the world, and yet in the other hand, we believe that Jesus is working to make all things new and to make those things right. I wrestled a lot this week with how we can talk about the spiritual discipline of simplicity. How am I supposed to dig into something that I feel like is really important, but I am struggling with? Because there are things where I am experiencing joy in, while at the same time there are things in which I am experiencing frustration, pain, and maybe even doubt. There is a truth about simplicity that I think needs to be stated before we actually dig much into it. I think there's this misconception that simplicity means making things easier. And I get the sentiment. We like and we tend to long for things to be easier in our lives. But simplicity, that's not what it is. Simplicity is not about making things easier. It's about making things clear. If you think about the furniture that you have bought and had to assemble on your own, sometimes the directions are so confusing that you honestly just want to throw that piece of furniture against the wall and just call it quits, right? And then there's IKEA, which IKEA doesn't even use words in their directions. They just have this strange little drawn character, and then there's pictures of what you're supposed to put together, and they give you this tiny little wrench tool. And yet, I have never really had an issue putting together something from IKEA. Simplicity can end up making things easier, but often it isn't about making things easier. It's about making things more clear. And yes, clarity will often make things easier to understand, but it doesn't always mean it's easier to engage in. The truth of Jesus is that he came to earth not to make things easier necessarily, but to make things more clear. And we're going to see some of this clarity as we go along, but essentially Jesus came to say, look, the world is not as it was supposed to be. Hatred and greed, malice, anger, abuse, racism, murder, aggression, whatever should be placed in that definition of what is wrong with the world, Jesus came to acknowledge as the problem and then to make it right. to replace hatred with love, greed with generosity, malice with justice and righteousness, anger with joy and peace, racism with equity and value, worth and opportunity, murder with service, aggression with patience, and so on and so much more. Jesus stepped into the reality of the world's chaos and was the ultimate example of simplicity, saying all of this is nonsense that leads to division and oftentimes death. But I have come to bring life and life to the fullest. And that's from John 10, verse 10. See, Jesus came to bring simplicity to a chaotic world. He said there is evil and there is death in the world, and I am here to correct the brokenness and bring you life. You know, I think the beauty of simplicity that I have seen this week as I've been preparing for this time is that simplicity doesn't ignore the issues in the world. It doesn't hide from the reality of our present condition. It acknowledges it and then addresses it with the most radically clear message of hope. That the only remedy for all that is wrong in the world, the only path toward new life as we long to see it in the world, the only path towards justice and goodness and real love is through one means, one avenue, one way, one person, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And that's what we're talking about this morning as we discuss this spiritual discipline of simplicity. You know, so last week we took a little detour in our series, which you know by now, to spend a few weeks talking about spiritual disciplines. And last week, we talked briefly about the spiritual discipline of study. And so again, this week we're taking a look at this idea of the spiritual discipline of simplicity. And honestly, this is a pretty special one to me because simplicity is one of our 4 core values at Missio. At Missio, we say our church is driven by intentional simplicity that allows the gospel to present itself in its clearest and most powerful way. It's something we work hard to achieve and we strive to become better at. And so this morning I want to share with you what I believe simplicity to be as a spiritual discipline and why it's a core value for us as a church. So a couple of years ago, I started seeing people on Facebook posting these videos from America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent or wherever it was, where there's like this kid or some group and they are telling kind of the behind the scenes storyline of whoever is about to perform that night. And a lot of times their story revolves around a significant challenge or life-altering moment that this family or individual has had to work through that has been really painful and hard. And then they'll talk about how their daughter wanted to sing or the dad wanted to perform, but he couldn't because he was caring for the family, or the mom was this incredibly gifted musician but had to sacrifice her talent to provide in an impossible situation for her family. And you have to realize these are real people's stories, but with the beauty of editing and background music, the people who are making these America's Got Talent clips, they know how to get the viewer to jump all the way in and invest all of our emotional capital in these 5-minute clips depicting this person's story and then their experience on America's Got Talent. And so typically they'll tell the background story and then it cuts to the kid or the parent or whoever it is that the background story is about, and they're now on stage at America's Got Talent. And they enter into what is one of the most remarkable performances of music or singing or some other talent imaginable. And let's be honest, you all know exactly what I'm talking about as I'm describing this, because you all have seen these clips from America's Got Talent on Facebook. Well, anyways, they finish performing and the audience is just blown away and everyone is giving this standing ovation. Simon Cowell and Howie Mandel and whoever else is judging during that season are all standing, just discussing the beauty of what just took place based on the background story that we had all heard right before they performed. And again, you know how the rest of the video goes. Simon or Howie are like, that was remarkable, simply astounding. That was a terrible British accent. That wasn't even... And then it cuts to a view of the family that's stage right, watching on with pride and joy. And then Simon is like, and there is only one thing now that I have to do. And then in slow motion, he slams the golden buzzer. The audience is going nuts. Confetti is falling everywhere. The family is now in tears, hugging their dad or their mom or their daughter or whoever it is that's performing. The judges, they head up on stage and they start hugging the family. They're hugging each other and everyone else that they can hug. And I mean, by this time, I am 5 minutes into this video, fully invested in this moment, not realizing that tears are streaming down my face while I stare into my computer with my noise-canceling headphones, blocking out the noise of the world around me. And look, don't try to tell me that you haven't found yourself in that same exact scenario. Because you know that you cry at those videos too. I'm not the only one. But you know, there is this strange phenomenon that I think sometimes happens within me where I'll watch a movie or some TV show or watch a clip on Facebook. And it grabs my attention in such a way that I find myself fully invested in it, longing to experience something similar for myself. And I think we all do this from time to time. We watch other people's stories, either through movies, TV, or social media, longing to experience something similar, oftentimes not realizing that those moments are either rehearsed because it's a movie or TV, or it's a real person's story, but their story is edited down to a 5-minute clip that is meant to elicit an emotional response and draw you in. And I think sometimes what happens when we train ourselves to consume moments like this is that we start measuring our own stories up against the 5-minute clips or scripted moments of grandeur. And we start to wonder, why don't I have moments like that in my life? Where's my confetti moment with Simon Cowell hugging me, telling me that my family is amazing and that we should be proud of whatever it is that we have accomplished? I think oftentimes we look for extraordinary moments in every place other than our own story because to us, our story feels simply ordinary. And we want to perhaps escape the ordinary because we long to have the extraordinary. You know, there's another truth that over the past year, I think a lot of our world has slowly begun to recognize and see as a real problem, which is the busyness that we tend to live our lives out of. When we all went into quarantine and were forced to stay home and slow down, there were a number of responses that we probably had and felt, but I feel like there are two that were most prevalent. Either we said things like, what am I doing? I'm going nuts because I need more things to do. Or we realized, wow, I had no idea of the pace that I was living my life by. You know, one of the biggest challenges for me is constantly living in a what comes next kind of mentality that causes me to create busyness so that I can feel like I'm productive. Being present in the moment can oftentimes be a challenge for me. I'm always looking to the next project, the next meeting, the next day when I'm going to get to do this really awesome, cool thing, or the next episode, or the next, whatever it is, name it for yourself. And see, I think both of these cultural pieces, the desire to escape the ordinary in search of the extraordinary, and the constant what comes next busyness, cause us to miss countless moments taking place right in front of us. You know, just thinking about this for myself, it honestly pains me to think of the moments that I have missed as I was mentally looking forward to the moments that hadn't yet happened, or because I was trying to escape into the reality of maybe the Marvel Universe or something like that, where every day seems to be one where a superhero is saving the world. And I can only really share my own story and experience with this, but my assumption is that many of us, many of you, wrestle with this sort of thing. We live in a culture and time where our lives have become so complex and so complicated and fast-paced that we are in a perpetual state of missing the present moment. And see, this is what makes simplicity so important. One of the most important reasons that we practice spiritual disciplines is because they are almost all intended to get us to slow down, to stop the hurry, and to embrace the moment with God. And none of the disciplines is geared towards this truth more than the spiritual discipline of simplicity. In simplicity, we are taking back control of our lives away from the strain of busyness and the burden of always seeking out the extraordinary, and we are placing our lives into the hands of God. To acknowledge that every moment that we have is a gift and a blessing that shouldn't be missed. So what are we talking about when we say simplicity? Simplicity is the spiritual practice of slowing down, focusing, creating priority, and eliminating the unnecessary from our lives in order to create clarity. And I want to say that again so that we all catch that. Simplicity is the spiritual practice of slowing down, focusing, creating priority, and eliminating the unnecessary from our lives in order to create clarity. It's the process of quieting and slowing our urges for what comes next in order to live present in the moment. To see and experience God in the now, in our family dinner, in our exercise, or our phone call with a friend, and reading together as a family. The goal of simplicity is to allow Jesus to rid our heart of everything that distracts and takes ourselves away from experiencing His love and His goodness right now. It's not about adding something to our lives. In fact, it's the very opposite. It's about finding the things that are most important and then beginning to rid our lives of everything else that distracts us from gaining what is important, primarily our connection and our relationship with Jesus. And this inner posturing of simplicity then has a ripple effect in how we see, how we interact with and engage with the things that are around us and the relationships that are around us. Simplicity will cause us to become more generous because we realize that all we have is a gift from God that we long to share with the people around us. It will create more space in our lives to form meaningful connections with our family or maybe with our friends. It will make us more neighborly because it will help us see the importance of connection with people around us, to love them and to serve them. The discipline of simplicity will pull us out of this constant need to know what comes next, to be simply present with what is taking place in the now. And it will remind us that the ordinary moments of life already contain the extraordinary in them. Meaning we have no need to go and search for the extraordinary outside of our own story because it is already there all around us. Think about the moments with your friends around the table, playing cards with your kids, calling a friend, having a patio party around a fire pit, or going kayaking just for the silence. There is nothing more extraordinary than forming meaningful relationships with Jesus and the people around you. But in our constant state of hurry or escaping what feels ordinary, we miss the very real and present extraordinary moments taking place all around us every day. Dallas Willard has said that hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. You need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Simplicity helps us slow down in order to experience spiritual growth and a depth of relationship in ways that we cannot experience without it. When you look at the Bible, there aren't a lot of passages that directly mention the word simplicity. However, the spiritual idea of simplicity is on nearly every page. 1 Timothy chapter 6 is a conversation about money and how countless people make their lives about making more and more money. And the Bible doesn't teach that having money is wrong, but rather that the love of money above everything else leads to all sorts of unfortunate things. And so in 1 Timothy 6:6 it says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." Again, he is saying that is he saying that money is bad or wrong? No, he's saying that when everything in our life is about money, we tend to create a life of hurry to make more and more of it, which, as we have all seen throughout our world, leads to abuses of all kinds. And then he gets to the heart of the issue when he says, look, we didn't bring anything into the world and we can't take anything out of it. So be content with what you have. Jesus himself echoes this idea on a number of occasions, this idea of contentment and moving beyond worry. And so in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 30, Jesus says, "And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day, every day, has enough troubles of its own." Jesus later says in John 6:35, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry again. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty again." See, Jesus obviously understands that we have to take care of our families and provide for our needs. He isn't saying that those are real situations that we find ourselves in with concern for how to pay the bills or where our next job will be or how to be a better parent. But he's saying that when those things consume our being, the concern turns to worry and the worry turns to missing God in the moment, to what God is doing to provide opportunities and to care for your needs, perhaps through the people all around you. And so he's saying, so seek God first, and he will bring a sense of peace in the midst of the challenge. One of my other favorite scriptures that helps me understand this idea of simplicity is from Micah chapter 6, where God is looking at his people who had apparently forgotten everything that he had done for them. And he begins to call them out, saying, "Come on, guys. What have I done to make you forget me? Don't you remember that I brought you out of Egypt? I sent you Moses. I had Balaam bless you." And I love this. He says, "I did everything I could to teach you of my faithfulness to you." And I love the response to God's accusation that we see in Micah 6:6-7. The response is, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?" And it's as if they are hearing the accusation of God and responding with what they think God would want, listing off way after way after way. They feel like they can make amends to God. And God hears the chaos of the response, and he responds by giving them a sense of simplicity. And so in verse 8, he says, "No, my people, the Lord has told you what is good, and this is what he requires of you: to do what is right, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God." He's saying it's more simple than all that sacrifice stuff you just mentioned. You know what to do. Do what is right. Love mercy, or in some versions it'll say love kindness, and walk humbly with me. See, God is saying you are complicating it. It's more simple than that, and you know this. Isn't it Occam's razor that says when presented with two options, the most simple option is probably the correct one? But see, our human intuition is to overcomplicate things, and God is saying, no, stop. It's way more simple than that. It's about Jesus. It's about doing what is right and just. It's about loving kindness and walking in humility with God. Get this right, and the rest will sort of fall into place. Simplicity is the active slowing of life's pace, placing things in their proper order and seeking to focus our attention on what is most important, primarily our relationship with Jesus. I mentioned at the beginning that this is a core value at Missio. And that's because we believe that oftentimes churches make church overly complicated, forgetting the reason or mission that they were created for. We don't try to oversaturate your life with programs or activity for the sake of activity. We want to ensure that the things that we create and build are helping us as a family pursue our mission together. And remember, our mission is to love God, love people, and awaken a movement, which comes directly from Jesus' response to the Pharisees when they asked him in Matthew 22, "Which is the greatest command, Jesus?" And see, they assumed that Jesus would go into this long argument over the Pharisees' interpretations of the more than 600 laws that they had. But Jesus instead simplified all the laws and quoted the Shema that we looked at last week, saying, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." And then he quotes Leviticus 19, which says, "And love your neighbor as yourself." And then I love this. He tacks on this last statement in this conversation with the Pharisees. He says, the entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Everything can be summed up with just these two: love God, love people. Simplicity is a core value at Missio because we believe Jesus constantly called his disciples and the rest of the people around him into a simple understanding of life with God. And by simple, we aren't saying dumbed down. Jesus himself answered a complicated question about the laws of the Jews by creating simplicity. By saying you can keep all of these laws, every single one of them you can keep, but if you fail to love God and you fail to love people, then you have missed everything. And so our church is driven by intentional simplicity that allows the gospel to present itself in its clearest and most powerful way. So how can you practice simplicity? Because if we're honest with ourselves, this is the golden question that we have, right? The idea of simplicity sounds great, but it's a lot harder to achieve than we might realize. Simplicity takes a lot of work, especially on the front end, to make happen. I just finished a 90-day spiritual disciplines experience called Exodus 90 with a few guys that I know. And a lot of you know this. But the point was trying to simplify life in order to make as much space as possible for God's presence and the things that really matter. But as soon as the 90 days were up, I found myself filling all that time and space with the same old habits and rhythms that I had worked hard to eliminate. Because my natural tendency is to fill every space and moment with as much activity as possible, which inevitably causes me to miss important moments right in front of me. And so we are really all doing this together. I need to recapture simplicity for myself, and I'm sure that you do too. And so here are just a few ways that you can do this. First, identify the things that you tend to escape into when you are feeling tired. So TV, your phone, social media, movies, eating, whatever it is, what do you escape into when you are just beat and exhausted, needing to pull away? And then ask a very simple question of each thing that you put on that list. How does this thing bring me life? Life with God, life with my family, life with my friends. And so that's the first thing. Second, begin to cut away certain things from your daily rhythms that you don't need. Before Exodus 90, I was watching a lot of TV at night, and that was removed when I started that, and I discovered all this time, right, to read or spend time with Laura or the kids. So maybe for you, it's that you fall into your phone and the world becomes blacked out. Decide for yourself what you can remove to make time for Jesus and time for what really matters. Third, identify the things in your life that you could simply repurpose to create moments with God or family or friends. Maybe you like to work out. I like to work out. And so one of the awesome rhythms that Laura and I have created over the last couple of weeks is that we're now working out together. We never really used to work out together. Gardening is another thing that we can do together that we both love. What are the things in your life that you can repurpose to create intentional moments with God and others? Fourth, make a plan and stick to it. Simplicity rarely happens by accident. So develop a plan for how you will scale back, slow down, and live present in the moment. And then finally, which probably should have been the first thing, invite God into the process of creating simplicity in your life. Just the simple act of inviting God into this process of creating simplicity is a great opportunity for you to spend meaningful time with God. And it's really that simple. Begin in prayer and then keep conversing with God as you create your plan to simplify life. So that's it. That's simplicity. You do these things and you'll be well on your way to living into the spiritual discipline of simplicity. As always, we have a daily guide for this spiritual disciplines experience that we're going through. It's online at our website, missiochurchseattle.org. You can download it. You can print it off. It's kind of long. And you can follow along every day. Simplicity. It's not about making things easier. It's about making things clear. And the truth is that we need Jesus. The world needs Jesus. So let's work to create space in ourselves and in the spaces around us where Jesus can do his healing work. Oh, you thought we were done? Not quite. I have one more important thing to discuss briefly. On April 29th, 2019, Missio launched publicly as a church in the Northgate neighborhood of North Seattle, which means that next week, April 25th, would be the Sunday that we would normally be celebrating our birthday together as a church. However, this year we are going to be doing something just a little bit different. Worship is going to be online next week for our birthday, but we would love to have several of you guys meeting in homes around the city, gathering in small groups to worship online with us. Tara's going to have some music for worship that's going to be wonderful, and I'm going to have a short teaching on the spiritual discipline of solitude. And I know that solitude probably sounds like a weird thing to discuss on our birthday Sunday, but what would it look like in your week for you to spend half of a day with Jesus, where you scheduled and planned to go out on a hike on your own, or spend some time at the beach, or found your place and your way where you could just spend half the day in prayer and conversation and worship and journaling, yelling, dancing with God, whatever it is. What would that look like for you? And so here's what we're asking you to do between this week and next week. We want you to schedule and plan a half day with God. And now by half a day, we're talking about 4 to 5 hours. And obviously, I don't know your schedule, and I realize that for a lot of you, a lot of us, this will take some planning. But I promise it'll be worth it. But here's the important part that we want for our Birthday Sunday video that we're putting together for next week. I want as many of you guys to video yourself telling us either what you're planning to do for your half day with Jesus or how the experience went for you. And these videos, they need to be no more than just a minute in length, and you can send them to me either by email or directly to my phone, and both of those are listed in the description section below. And I'll compile all of those, and they will be part of our time of worship next week as we talk about solitude. We're also going to be sending you guys a gift from Missio as a celebration of our 3rd birthday. So if you remember last year, you got a mug, which was awesome. This year, you're going to get something awesome as well that I'm not going to tell you right now. I'm going to make you wait to find out what it is. But I'm super, super excited for it. Also, by the way, we do have more mugs left over if anyone would like one or more. There are plenty more. So that's what next week on April 25th is going to be. Plan to get together with some people in a home. We're going to have a worship online. Tara's going to lead some songs, me talking about solitude. And then I need you to send me those short videos of what you're planning to do to spend that half day with God. And I need you to get it to me no later than Friday afternoon so that I can add them to our video for next week. And it's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing. And then the following week, on May 2nd, we're going to meet here in my backyard for a time of celebration for our 3rd birthday. And everyone's going to be invited. We'll have cake, balloons. I'm going to do magic tricks I'm going to learn on YouTube potentially. And we're going to worship. We're going to take communion. We're going to celebrate being a church in our new year together. It's going to be really a wonderful experience. So look for more information next week about that in-person gathering here at my house on May 2nd. Well, everybody, thank you for being a part of this time with us today. I love you all, and I'm so grateful for each of you. And I'll see you next week online for our Birthday Sunday. So again, don't forget to send me that 1-minute video clip of what you're doing for your half day with God. Bye, guys.